The word lobbying comes from the idea that in the old days in Britain, but also in the US, people who wanted to talk to the elected officials, the president in the US or the members of the House of Lords, were just waiting in this lobby. The space where people coming from the countryside, people coming from different industries, at the time of the Industrial Revolution in particular, were waiting for decision makers to sell them their agendas and therefore shaping their decision makers. And since people were spending time there, they were referred to as lobbies, people that were spending the time to influence the decision makers in that critical moment before they were taking a decision, thus informing their decisions. Needless to say, in those instances, historically, citizens were not there, were not represented. They were special interest groups that were pushing for the bottom line of their industry and their groups. So you can see that historically lobbying has been hijacked by special interests since the very beginning. It has been a practice of the few, not a practice of the many.
Is the word lobbying still controversial in the world of nonprofits and philanthropy? Or is it a legitimate tool for the social sector?
Well, the word lobbying is very loaded, it's very negative. When people hear about lobbying, think about dodgy dealings where big corporations are actually getting the favor of politicians. Lobbying is in reality simply the attempt of influencing decision maker. Lobbying is about participation. It's something that anybody can do, and we try to do, but probably don't do enough. And that's why over the years I've been trying to demystify, beautify, and potentially democratize lobbying as a legitimate activity that is essential in any democracy because it allows the different interests in society to get a voice and to basically let decision makers know why they might care about a particular issue.
What is the Lobbying for Good movement about? Who takes part in it? Who are the targets? And what is the intended reach?
The Lobbying for Good movement is a recent attempt at reclaiming lobbying as a legitimate form of participation. They should be practiced more by non-profit organizations, civil society, grassroots movement, as well as other social change actors with the support of philanthropies in an attempt at leveling up, equalizing access to power. So these kind of bottom-up initiatives are really trying to emerge as a result of that. And then we see some philanthropies that historically have been feeling very resistant to the idea of supporting political work. Foundations, philanthropies, historically want to stay away from the political. But now, all of a sudden, we see several foundations, in particular in North America, but also in Europe, more and more, they are willing to provide, through grant-making, financial support to organizations that are working on the most intractable issues. And they're also trying to leveling up. What do I mean by leveling up? They are trying to push public authorities to proactively creating the conditions for everybody to get a seat around the table. Historically, countries around Europe and the World Bank has been pushing for this, the OECD, have been creating more and more opportunities for citizens to actually take part to a public consultation. But they understood this as a simple way of creating a cosmetic approach to participation. It's a very tokenistic understanding. Everybody, in principle, can show up and tell us what they prefer. But we know that the realities of participation don't bring everybody around the table. So traditionally, most of the meetings taking place between politicians and third parties have to do with big corporations and not with student associations, trade unions, or nonprofits. But more and more, we see this pressure on public authorities, and this is the major claim of the Good Lobby movement, that public authorities have to create the conditions for everybody to get a seat around the table, because structurally, not all those voices get the same voice at the table. So it's a David and Goliath battle, and that's what the Lobbying for Good movement would like to overcome, making sure everybody has a say, everybody got the ear of the policymakers.
You are proposing a model for citizens' participation in EU decision-making. What does it bring to the table?
The European Union, the European project, has over the years been subject to a fair criticism. Even the European elections, if you think about it, something we do every 5 years, are not very European. We vote on different dates. The Dutch vote on Thursday, many vote on Friday, and others on Saturday. The Italians still vote on Monday morning. We vote for national political parties. We vote for national political leaders presenting us national agendas, There's nothing European in the European election. So my research question over the years has always been, what if Europe would have been inhabited by citizens who have been using these tools of participations much more in the space of in-between elections? What if instead of having 70 or 80 European citizen initiatives, we have had 2,000 or 1 million? So you see the paradox in which we are. Citizens remain neglected in European integration, but they never had so many opportunities to actually shape the direction of Europe. But Europe suffers from a sort of intelligibility deficit. We don't know at what level of governance decisions are taken, because it's very confusing. We have the local level, we have the national, we have the European, and in particular, the European political players, political families, are not visible to us. Not only we lack a European political system, but we also lack a European public sphere, enabling us to judge and hold accountable decision makers on what to do. This is the quantum leap Europe has to make, because if it doesn't, it will become more and more difficult for the Union to remain legitimate and credible in the eyes of European citizens who actually perceive to be completely sidelined in a process that is affecting them. And this is no longer sustainable.